Hi there, and welcome to the Explaining History YouTube channel. And the thing I want to talk to you about today a little bit is some of the questions I often get from parents and from pupils about the point of studying history. After all, it's looking at the past. Why do people do it? Why do we bother? And what use is it? And I'm going to show to you today that it's of absolutely vital importance that we have a good understanding of the past, and it's never been more important. Given the changes that are happening around us, from the development of the internet that's been happening over the last 20 years, from the recent crisis with the EU, depending on whatever you thought of the Brexit debate, whichever way you voted, having an understanding of Britain's past, present, and future is really essential. The rise of Donald Trump, the events happening within Russia with Vladimir Putin, the possibility of Marine Le Pen, a French fascist, stepping into the Elysee Palace, stepping into power in France. All these things are of vital importance for us to understand. Some might say, well, that is the realm of studying politics. Well, it kind of is. And yet, none of these things happen in a vacuum. None of these things happen and spring out of a hole in the ground. They all have origins. And studying history can help us to understand that. So you might be sitting there thinking, yes, but will it help my child get a job? Well, if you're a student, you might be sitting there thinking, will it help me get a job? And the answer is, well, I don't know. Now, you might think that's a bit of a flippant and facetious answer, but it has legs, trust me. I don't know whether within 20 or 30 years' time there will be jobs for anybody. Why do I say that? Because the latest reports and studies on the development of automation suggest that a huge swathe of employment and of different work roles are going to be made obsolete by new technologies, the new technologies of the 21st century that are going to come along. Then we're really going to see history in action. This all sounds kind of bleak, but it is and it isn't. If you are able to have a sound critical understanding of the world, it is your best chance of being able to navigate the big changes that you as a 21st century citizen or your children are going to live through. The myth that we were told in the 1990s, when there was abundant cheap credit around, relatively low fuel prices, the Cold War had ended, and history seemed to be over. There was a decade really where things were really quite good fun. The view that was propagated by governments all over the world was that the main political questions of our time that had really dominated the 20th century, those were over. They'd been answered. Communism had been defeated. Nazism had been defeated. And all that really existed was capitalism, the system we live under now, and liberal democracy, and that would just grow and grow, and we would find that the final problems of history would be gradually mopped up. And now all we needed to do was listen to Britpop, have a good time, watch the Spice Girls, live on history's credit card, and away we go. That all proved not to last, as you can see. We are really in the throes of major historical events once more. If you lived in other parts of the world in the 1990s, by the way, such as parts of Africa or the Balkans, you were probably well aware that history was happening as people with machetes turned up in your village or NATO bombed you. But as far as we in the wealthy Western world were concerned, it seemed to be all over by the shooting. Well, no. The way that sort of trickled down into education was that there was a kind of a certain depoliticising of the study of history, that really we needed to pay a little lip service to the past, but ultimately it wasn't particularly an important subject anymore. One result was that history became a non-compulsory subject, and still is. So we have a lot of contempt for history, culturally. We are in the throes, still a very powerful idea. I'm not saying kind of everyone individually, but collectively, we're in the whole, a very powerful idea that history hasn't really got a lot to teach us, and that we live in a kind of an endless now, and that our daily pursuits of consuming and spending and enjoying ourselves are really the only reality in which we exist. Now, this is, if it hasn't already come profoundly unstuck, will do fairly soon. And the importance of understanding the past will be, once again, absolutely vital to our well-being. So, as far as employment goes, well, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen next week, next month, next year. The future is changing so rapidly, or the present is changing so rapidly, that it's very difficult to predict the future. But certainly, there will probably always be, until the machines take over, until we're living in the Matrix, there's probably always going to be a massive demand for people that can think critically about the world. So what does that mean? It's that people who can look at evidence, look at facts and data, and query whether that is valid, and what decisions we should base on that. These are the kinds of thinkers that will be very, very useful in the 21st century. And these are the skills that history teaches you. If we think beyond kind of standard career advice, and if I was a career advisor, I'd be a career advisor. And think about the bigger picture of the challenges we face, of automation, climate change, terrorism, the possibility of war between great powers again, which is potentially on the cards, I'm afraid to say. We need to think about what history can equip us with to navigate those challenges. The days of the kind of the golden era of the 1990s, where we could sit back and say that history is over, as I said, are long gone. And we need now, as a population, I'm not just talking as a national population, I'm speaking to you from Great Britain, wherever you are, but as a world population, we need to be engaged and collective together. So, depending on, you may well have a range of different political persuasions, but if we are determined to do something about climate change, if we're determined to do something about the threat of xenophobia and racist nationalism that now faces the world. By the way, if you like these two things, this probably isn't a YouTube channel for you, but I'm assuming you don't, because by and large most people in the world are sane and rational individuals. But if we want to face these challenges, we need to understand their origins. We need to understand their roots. Therefore, we know the nature of the beast. We don't stand a chance against the kind of the current madnesses that grip us, unless because they're all just generated by human beings, unless we understand the big stories as to how they came to exist. Now, your son or daughter will outlive you, outlive me, and will exist in the 21st century long after we're gone. And they are the custodians of the future. Not just the custodians of their own future, and the custodians of the planet. And we suffer from, internationally, globally, a dearth of critical thinkers. The recent story of the presidential election in America certainly points to that fact. Not that I am suggesting that it's an issue there alone. So we have to find ways now of ensuring into the future that our children can think for themselves, think critically, and can think critically on behalf of the society as a whole. It will ensure that they have a future, and it will ensure that everybody else does. Well, I hope so anyway. History is obviously not the only way in which to do that. There is within every academic discipline the tools of becoming an articulate, educated, empowered, and liberated individual. I think finally that word liberated is the most important. Understanding the past, understanding the world, and understanding the processes that make the world and that make the realities of the present is liberating. It allows your child to be free. And that is far more important than the promise of a job in a call centre or, working as a delivery driver for Dixon's or whatever it is that we all wind up doing. The career route doesn't matter half as much, isn't half as important as the ability to have a liberated, intelligent, critical thinker. Because once you've got that, jobs and the future and money and all that kind of take care of themselves. So whenever you're thinking about why studying history, don't put the cart before the horse. Don't think about jobs, don't think about careers, don't think about any of that. Think about how will my child, or my son or my daughter, become an intelligent, critical thinker about the world. Because if those guys are in short supply, by and large, when your child is able to be that person, they'll be in high demand, and that's where your high rolling career comes from. Anyway, I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.